And I should be recording. What's going on? Sifted YouTube, Twitter's, Facebook, all the social media peeps. It is I, the Berkough, and I'm back with another drunk play. It's been a really long time since I've done one of these, so I figured I would come back and do one with the Stanley Parable. This is one of my favorite games of all time. This is definitely GOTY of the year 2013.
This is the story of a man named Stanley.
And I'll let the intro play.
Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-winning, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy. And then one day, something very peculiar happened. Something that would forever change Stanley. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on the monitor for him to follow. No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years at the company had this happened, this complete isolation. Something was very clearly wrong. Shocked, frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and stepped out of his office.
Alright, so this game is a game all about player agency and sort of challenging what it is that a player can actually do in a game, which is what makes this so phenomenal. This evening, I am drinking The Ringer by Bad Beat Brewing. So if you've been following the Beer Umbrits, you know that I picked up a bunch of Bad Beat Brew a couple of weeks ago, and this is one of the 4 or 6 packs that I got. Really good beer. This is it's a Pilsner, which essentially is like a German lager. Pretty good. The last batch that I got was extremely hoppy, and way too hoppy for a Pilsner, but this batch tastes a lot like what you would expect from a craft version of MGD or Pabst Blue Ribbon or Budweiser. Really clear, light in color, pretty light overall. Not quite as watery and light as Bud Light, obviously, but it does have decent flavor to it. It does have some hop. It does have some malt, but just an easy drinking beer. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into it.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo. No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
Now, I don't remember exactly what happens if you turn off all the computers, but there is like a little hidden Easter egg. This game's full of like little hidden Easter eggs if you try different things as you're making your way through the office.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
Now, when I was saying that this game's all about player agency, you can go to the door on the right. It's the game almost encourages you to do that, but for this first run through, which each time to get to an ending is about 5 to 10 minutes, I'm actually going to follow the narrator's instructions so that you guys can see that and see like the general basic ending, because it does have a lot to say, like I said, about player agency.
Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer there.
It's all about the endings themselves. So the whole game is about just discovering the different endings.
Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
All right, so if you listen to the narrator, he walked upstairs. You can go downstairs. I'm going to go ahead and go up. Here's his boss's office.
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. Shocked, unraveled, Stanley wondered in disbelief who orchestrated this. What dark secret was being held from him? What he could not have known was that the keypad behind the boss's desk guarded the terrible truth that his boss had been keeping from him. And so the boss had assigned it an extra secret PIN number. 2845. But of course, Stanley couldn't possibly have known this. Yet incredibly, by simply pushing random buttons on the keypad, Stanley happened to input the correct code by sheer luck. Amazing. He stepped into the newly opened passageway.
So already there's been like 3 or 4 instances where the narrators told you to do one thing, you had the option to go do another.
Descending deeper into the building, Stanley realized he felt a bit peculiar. It was a stirring of emotion in his chest, as though he felt more free to think for himself, to question the nature of his job. Why did he feel this now, when for years it had never occurred to him? This question would not go unanswered for long.
Obviously, the beginning of the game, you are just another robot in the corporate...
Stanley walked straight ahead through the large door that read Mind Control Facility.
in the corporate oligarchy. You can't escape, but the narrator told us to go to the mind control facility, so let's do that.
The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens. What horrible secret did this place hold? Stanley thought to himself. Did he have the strength to find out? Now the monitors jumped to life, their true nature revealed. Each bore the number of an employee in the building, Stanley's co-workers. Lives of so many individuals reduced to images on a screen, and Stanley, one of them, eternally monitored in this place where freedom meant nothing.
I love the guy that they got to do the narration on this. His voice is amazing.
This mind control facility, it was too horrible to believe. It couldn't be true. Had Stanley really been under someone's control all this time? Was this the only reason he was happy with his boring job? That his emotions had been manipulated to accept it blindly? No, he refused to believe it. He couldn't accept it. His own life in someone else's control? Never! It was unthinkable, wasn't it? Was it even possible? Had he truly spent his entire life utterly blind to the world? But here was the proof, the heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions, happy or sad or content, walking eating, working, all of it monitored and commanded from this very place. And as the cold reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life. For he would dismantle the controls once and for all.
So we can turn it on, or we can turn it off. The narrator has instructed us that we shall dismantle this, so let's go and turn it off.
Blackness and a rising chill of uncertainty. Was it over? Yes. He had won. He had defeated the machine, unshackled himself from someone else's command. Freedom was mere moments away. And yet, even as the immense door slowly opened, Stanley reflected on how many puzzles still lay unsolved. Where had his co-workers gone? How had he been freed from the machine's grasp? What other mysteries did this strange building hold? But as sunlight streamed into the chamber, he realized none of this mattered to him, for it was not knowledge or even power that he had been seeking, but happiness. Perhaps his goal had not been to understand, but to let go. No longer would anyone tell him where to go, what to do, or how to feel. Whatever life he lives, it will be his. And that was all he needed to know. It was perhaps the only thing worth knowing. Stanley stepped through the open door. Stanley felt the cool breeze upon his skin, the feeling of liberation, the immense possibility of the new path before him. This was exactly the way, right now, that things were meant to happen. And Stanley was happy.
So that's the beauty of this game, right? You follow the narrator's instructions, you get a happy ending. But the game just keeps going and then restarts. So you've reached an ending and now you're back where you started, and
all of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo. No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
Right. Looks like we're doing this again. I don't know why I'm still in this loop, right? So input received on that computer. The more you do it, I can't remember what happens if you do all four. It's been a long time since I played this.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
Now here's the decision, the first decision that you have to actually make. Do you enter the door on the left, or do you go to the one on the right? Given that you went all the way left and followed the narrator's instructions, maybe this is your opportunity to just ignore him and go right.
This was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it.
Well, maybe not, but this is where it's taking you, so...
Truly a room worth admiring. It had really been worth the detour after all, just to spend a few moments here in this immaculate, beautifully constructed room. Stanley simply stood here, drinking it all in. But eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left.
Now, if you take the first open door on your left, you do head back towards the regular end of the game. Or you can continue to ignore the narrator's instructions and go through this door.
Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago. Look, Stanley, I think perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. I'm not your enemy, really, I'm not. I realize that investing your trust in someone else can be difficult, but the fact is that the story has been about nothing but you all this time.
Now you can actually drop down here,
Stanley.
but...
Someone you've forgotten about. Please, stop trying to make every decision by yourself. Now, I'm not asking for me, I'm asking for her.
I actually kind of like this ending here.
This is it, Stanley. Your chance to redeem yourself, to put your work aside, to let her back into your life. She's been waiting. That's her, Stanley. You need to be the one to do this, to reach out to her. If you can truly place your faith in another.
So if you answer the phone, this is another quote-unquote ending.
Stanley, is that you? Hold on, sweetie. Sorry to keep you waiting. I'm just pulling the bread out of the oven. All right. Okay, there we go. All right, now, I want you to come in and tell me all about your day.
Gotcha. Oh, come on. Did you actually think you had a loving wife who'd want to commit their life to you? I'm trying to make a point here, Stanley. I'm trying to get you to see something. Come inside. Let me show you what's really going on here. This is a very sad story about the death of a man named Stanley.
Suddenly, things have taken a toll.
Stanley is quite a boring fellow. He has a job that demands nothing of him, and every button that he pushes is a reminder of the inconsequential nature of his existence. Look at him there, pushing buttons, doing exactly what he's told to do. Now he's pushing a button. Now he's eating lunch. Now he's going home. Now he's coming back to work. One might even feel sorry for him, except that he's chosen this life.
Kind of stuck, so...
But in his mind, in his mind he can go on fantastic adventures. From behind his desk, Stanley dreamed of wild expeditions into the unknown, fantastic discoveries of new lands. It was wonderful. And each day that he returned to work was a reminder that none of it would ever happen to him. And so he began to fantasize about his own job. First, he imagined that one day while at work, he stepped up from his desk to realize that all of his co-workers, his boss, everyone in the building had suddenly vanished off the face of the earth. The thought excited him terribly. So he went further. He imagined that he came to 2 open doors and that he could go through either. At last, choice. It barely even mattered what lay behind each door. The mere thought that his decisions would mean something was almost too wonderful to behold.
The commentary on what you just went through is amazing, because it forces you to press these buttons at this point.
As he wandered through this fantasy world, he began to fill it with many possible paths and destinations. Down one path lay an enormous round room with monitors and mind controls. And down another was a yellow line that weaved in many directions. And down another was a game with a baby. And he called it the Stanley Parable.
Oh, so we've experienced one of those. He's expressed that there are at least 2 other paths that we haven't been down yet. Right.
It was such a wonderful fantasy, and so in his head he relived it again And then again, and again, over and over, wishing beyond hope that it would never end, that he might always feel this free. Surely there's an answer down some new path, mustn't there be? Perhaps if he played just one more time. But there is no answer. How could there possibly be? In reality, all he's doing is pushing the same buttons he always has. Nothing has changed. The longer he spends here, the more invested he gets, the more he forgets which life is the real one. And I'm trying to tell him this, that in this world he can never be anything but an observer, that as long as he remains here, he's slowly killing himself. But he won't listen to me. He won't stop. Here, watch this. Stanley, the next time the screen asks you to push a button, do not do it. You see? Can he just not hear me? How can I tell him in a way that he'll understand that every second he remains here, he's electing to kill himself? How can I get him to see what I see? How can I make him look at himself?
Please press F to question nothing.
I suppose I can't, not in the way I want him to. But I don't make the rules. I simply play to my intended purpose, the same as Stanley. We're not so different, I suppose. I'll try once more to convey all this to him. I'm compelled to. I must. Perhaps, well, maybe this time he'll see. Maybe this time. And I tried again, and Stanley pushed a button. And I tried again, and Stanley pushed a button. And I...
So that's one of the bleaker endings that you get. And it should restart. Now, what choice do we really have?
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room to check on his co-workers. He never functioned well by himself and constantly needed support and guidance from others, so the thought of total solitude was terrifying to him. No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
So I'm actually going to do the...
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
one of the other darker endings.
This was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it. Wow. Yes, this room. What a beautiful room. What a gorgeous, gorgeous room. Thank goodness Stanley had taken this detour on his way to the meeting room. Life without having experienced this room was now too horrible even to consider.
We shall continue
Yes, really. But eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left.
on. Now, we can take the first open door on the left and complete the narrator's designed path. Or we can try what we just tried and escape it, I guess. So that's what I'm going to do. This is one of my more favorite endings.
Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago.
And so we
Look,
get on
Stanley, I think
this.
perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. I'm not your enemy, really, I'm not. I realize that investing in your trust in someone else can be difficult, but the fact is that the story has been about nothing but you all this time. There's someone you've been neglecting, Stanley. Someone you... What? Really? I was in the middle of something. Do you have zero consideration for others? Are you that convinced that I want something bad to happen to you? Why, I don't know how to convince you of this, but I really do want to help you, to show you something beautiful. Look, let me prove it. Let me prove that I'm on your side. Give me a chance. Now listen carefully, this is important. Stanley walked through the red door.
We're going to walk through the blue door.
Aha! Perhaps you misunderstood. Stanley walked through the red door.
I want to go through the blue door.
I still don't think we're communicating properly. Stanley walked through the red door.
Gosh darn it. Oh, there is another blue door, but the red door's good. Let's do the red door.
Oh, thank God you are willing to listen to me. Do you see that I really have wanted you to be happy all this time? The problem is all these choices. The two of us always trying to get somewhere that isn't here. Running and running and running, just the way you're doing right now. Don't you see that it's killing us, Stanley? I wanted to stop. We would both be so much happier if we just stopped. And I think I have a solution. Here, let me show you. What do we want? What are we looking for?
Now,
Here.
this is actually an ending that you can get
Isn't it?
if you just
If
stay
we
here.
just stay right here, right in this moment with this place, Stanley, I think I feel happy.
But
I actually feel happy.
I want to go back
No,
this way.
wait. Where are you going? Oh, no. Stay away from those stairs. If you hurt yourself, if you die, the game will reset. We'll lose all of this. Please, no, Stanley, let me stay here. Don't take this from me. No! Oh, thank God you lived. You had me worried there for a moment. No, what are you doing, Stanley? Please, I'm asking you not to take this away from me. I can't go back to what I was before. If you die, we'll both go back. Why are you doing this? Stanley, let's go back to the other room. Can you do that for me?
So you can go back to the other room. I'm gonna keep doing this stuff.
My God, is this really how much you dislike my game? That you'll throw yourself from this platform over and over to be rid of it? You are literally willing to kill yourself to keep me from being happy. Am I reading the situation correctly? Or maybe you're just getting a kick out of it. I don't know anymore. I just wanted us to get along. But I guess that was too much to ask. It looks like you wanted to make a choice after all. Well, this one is yours. Is it over? It's going to restart, isn't it? I'm going back.
So it restarts, but things are very different.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
If I can find the meeting room. Oh. Welcome to the whiteboard ending.
Stanley went around touching every little thing in the office, but it didn't make a single difference, nor did it advance the story in any way. When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
We may as well go to the left.
Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer there.
But maybe we don't want to go up to the boss's office. Let's maybe go to the broom closet.
Stanley stepped into the broom closet, but there was nothing here, so he turned around and got back on track.
If I remember correctly, there is an ending where if you just stand in the broom closet long enough...
There was nothing here. No choice to make, no path to follow. Just an empty broom closet.
I think the game
no
does
reason to still
eventually
be
end.
here.
But we'll continue on.
Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
So let's walk downstairs.
But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss, admitting he had left his post during work hours. He might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. All of my co-workers blinking mysteriously out of existence in a single moment for no reason at all? None of it made any logical sense. And as Stanley pondered this, he began to make other strange observations. For example, why couldn't he see his feet when he looked down? Why did doors close automatically behind him wherever he went? And for that matter, these rooms were starting to look pretty familiar. Were they simply repeating? No, Stanley said to himself, this is all too strange. This can't be real. And at last, he came to the conclusion that had been on the tip of his tongue. He just hadn't found the words for it. "I'm dreaming!" he yelled. "This is all a dream." Oh, what a relief Stanley felt to have finally found an answer, an explanation. His co-workers weren't actually gone. He wasn't going to lose his job. He wasn't crazy after all. And he thought to himself, I suppose I'll wake up soon. I'll have to go back to my boring real-life job pushing buttons. I may as well enjoy this while I'm still lucid. So, he imagined himself flying and began to gently float above the ground. Then he imagined himself soaring through space on a magical starfield, and it too appeared. It was so much fun, and Stanley marveled that he had still not woken up. How was he remaining so lucid? And then perhaps the strangest question of them all entered Stanley's head. One he was amazed he hadn't asked himself sooner. Why is there a voice in my head dictating everything that I'm doing and thinking? Now the voice was describing itself being considered by Stanley, who found it particularly strange. I'm dreaming about a voice describing me, thinking about how it's describing my thoughts, he thought. And while he thought it all very odd and wondered if this voice spoke to all people in their dreams, the truth was that, of course, this was not a dream. How could it be? Was Stanley simply deceiving himself, believing that if he's asleep, he doesn't have to take responsibility for himself? Stanley is as awake right now as he's ever been in his life. Now, hearing the voice speak these words was quite a shock to Stanley. After all, he knew for certain, beyond a doubt, that this was in fact a dream. Did the voice not see him float and make the magical stars just a moment ago? How else would the voice explain all that? This voice was a part of himself too. Surely, if he could just... He would prove it. He would prove that he was in control, that this was a dream. So he closed his eyes gently, and he invited himself to wake up. He felt the cool weight of the blanket on his skin, the press of the mattress on his back, the fresh air of a world outside this one. Let me wake up, he thought to himself. I'm through with this dream. I wish it to be over. Let me go back to my job. Let me continue pushing the buttons. Please, it's all I want. I want my apartment, and my wife, and my job. All I want is my life exactly the way it's always been. My life is normal. I am normal. Everything will be fine. I am okay.
But is he? He is not.
Stanley began screaming. Please, someone, wake me up. My name is Stanley. I have a boss. I have an office. I am real. Please, just someone tell me I am real. I must be real. I must be. Can anyone hear my voice? Who am I? Who am I? And everything went black.
What?
This is the story of a woman named Mariella. Mariella woke up on a day like any other. She arose, got dressed, gathered her belongings, and walked to her place of work. But on this particular day, her walk was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. And although she would soon turn to go call for an ambulance, for just a few brief moments, she considered the strange man. He was obviously crazy. This much she knew. Everyone knows what crazy people look like. And in that moment, she thought to herself how lucky she was.
Everyone
to be
knows
normal.
what crazy people
I am
look
sane.
like.
I am in control of my mind. I know what is real and what isn't. It was comforting to think this, and in a certain way, seeing this man made her feel better. But then she remembered the meeting she had scheduled for that day. The very important people whose impressions of her would affect her career, and by extension, the rest of her life. She had no time for this, so it was only a moment that she stood there, staring down at the body. And then she turned and ran.
All right, so those are some of my favorite endings in the Stanley Parable. You can start again, and you can just continue just going. You can play this game for hours and hours and hours. But I will leave it at that. I think those two endings, probably those three endings, however many we got through, probably my favorites in the game. They're the easiest to get to. Some of the other ones are a little more difficult to attain. And that is it for this drunk play. Had to do another one. Had to come back with it. And Mr. McWombles, I apologize for tomorrow. I might be a little hungover when we do our E3 conversations, but I will be there nonetheless. And so on that note, I bid you adieu, Internet.